So here we are, Tuesday, August 24th. It's 3:30, and I had the time today, so I'm doing another live uh, rather than a pre-recorded video. Just trying to finish setting up my settings. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic that wasn't necessarily sent to me, in the form of a question via email or through the chat, but it was someone who called me wanting to know the difference between murder and manslaughter. And the simplest way to explain that is one deals with intentional conduct, and one is not necessarily intentional, but more likely reckless. So murder, generally speaking, is when a person intentionally or knowingly causes the death of another person. It can also happen if you intended to commit serious bodily injury to that person, but it ended up resulting in death. That can also be charged as murder. Then we have, felony murder, which means during the commission of another felony, you ended up killing somebody. A good example of that, and I've tried a capital murder this way, and it was the accused broke into someone else's apartment to rob them, didn't think they were home, ended up, surprising each other, and the accused killed the apartment dweller to effectuate the rest of the robbery, which was what the burglary was for. But anyway, so on murder, then we have capital murder. Capital murder is distinguishable because that's where the state can seek the death penalty. If they do not seek the death penalty, then you could get capital life, which means life without parole. There are various ways to be charged with capital murder. In addition to the felony murder, it can be the killing of multiple persons. I've tried a capital murder in that situation. My client went into an establishment with the intent to kill someone. He did, and then when he was trying to leave the establishment, another citizen tried to apprehend him, I guess, and be a good Samaritan. They ended up getting into a tussle, and my client shot him, and he died as well. So my client was charged with capital murder because it was two people in the same criminal episode, and he got life without the possibility of parole. Now, manslaughter, which a lot of people charged with murder wish to have their case reduced to manslaughter, because while regular murder is a first-degree felony, meaning a minimum of 5 years, maximum of 99 years or life, and a fine not to exceed $10,000, and you are not eligible for probation for the offense of murder per statute. So lots of people charged with murder would love to have their case reduced to manslaughter because it's a second-degree felony, which carries a range of punishment of 2 to 20 years. The problem is that manslaughter, in order to get manslaughter, there has to be typically what your conduct was that resulted in the death of another has to be done recklessly. So you can think of a lot of ways that you could do reckless things that would result in the demise of another person. Firing a weapon in a metropolitan area, shooting a gun at the beach without aiming at someone, but you end up hitting someone in the head and killing them. You had no intent, but it was clearly reckless conduct, and so that would be manslaughter, the lesser included of manslaughter. In my capital trial that I mentioned with the 2 deaths, I attempted to argue to the jury that the second shooting was not intentional and just happened when they were rolling around on the ground. And since he didn't know that person, he couldn't have had any intent to kill him. The jury did not believe that. But it's an example of when we're in trial on these cases as defense attorneys, we will try to find a way to argue something to get a lesser included jury instruction so that a jury can find you guilty of a lesser offense than murder, right? And we do that in lots of trials. If a lesser included offense is available, then we would try to get that to the jury, so that we could get a lesser. And then obviously if you were facing life and you get a 2 to 20, that's a win. So without, then when we get to manslaughter, it can get more complicated because there is intoxication manslaughter. I would save intoxication manslaughter for another discussion and probably invite Thomas in, because since it involves intoxication, it necessarily means, DWI implications, which Thomas has a lot of extensive training in. And on the intoxication, though, if you think about it, it kind of follows with the manslaughter, meaning reckless conduct. There was no intent. Most people who get a DWI do not intend to commit a crime. It's not a specific intent crime, and so neither is manslaughter. Intent is irrelevant in a manslaughter case. What is relevant in a manslaughter case is the conduct or your actions, and were they so reckless that they led to the death of another. Another way we see manslaughter charged is also vehicle cases, but not involving intoxication, meaning, and we see this a lot in Galveston, car clubs will come to the island, and many of them will drive extremely recklessly, either on the way here or once they get here. And this usually happens with more of the performance vehicles when they have club meets. They'll come weaving in and out of traffic. They're all together traveling at a high rate of speed. I'm not talking about racing because that's another distinguishable offense that we could do on another day. As a matter of fact, we have at least 2 racing cases pending here in the office right now. But they didn't result in injury to anyone, so we don't have that issue. But, unless, if you had a specific question about would certain conduct be manslaughter or murder, I could obviously get into that with you if you wanted to email me or ask me a question in the chat here. But it's hard, without a fact scenario, it's hard for me to tell you the difference other than, murder's intentional, while manslaughter's not. It's born from reckless conduct. And so it is not typically easy to get a murder reduced to a manslaughter, since the murder is going to allege intentional conduct. And if it alleges intentional conduct, unless it's a very odd fact scenario, it's hard to argue that it was reckless. So while they are related in that they resulted in the death of a person, they are vastly different in application and in trying to get a reduction from a murder to a manslaughter, which is what the person who called me was asking about. Was, they had a pending murder, and what were the chances of getting it reduced to manslaughter? And, you know, it's almost impossible to answer questions like that because I don't know what's happened in the case prior to you talking to me. You know, but I tried to answer his question just like I'm trying to give it to you guys. It was just kind of an interesting phone conversation, and the guy had good questions. So I thought, well, hell, I'll talk about that on Tuesday. But that's about all I have today. I don't see any questions yet. I haven't gotten any emails. So that's about all I have on murder versus manslaughter, or, you know, manslaughter as the lesser included of murder, which is what the question that was asked of me was. Could I get someone's murder reduced to a manslaughter? And, you know, like I told him, you know, that's a very heavy burden. And this case that he was calling me about was a shooting. And so it's hard to argue that a shooting is reckless without some more specific facts. Like I said earlier, if you were on the beach, and I keep saying the beach because we have a case right now, but it's just aggravated assault. Our guy did fire a weapon into a crowd at a beach and hit someone, but that person did not die, or they were non-life-threatening injuries. So it's just aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. But it's just kind of a good example of the guy firing the gun into the crowd was certainly reckless. Now, in my case that we're talking about, he had reason to fear some of the people in the crowd, and so he's got other defensive issues. But it's just a good example, and especially when we get like around the 4th of July and people like to shoot their weapons off instead of just doing fireworks. It could lead to a manslaughter charge. So you fired a weapon and someone died, but it's not murder because you didn't shoot that person intentionally. So that's just one way to think about it. If y'all think of anything else, let me know in the comments or send me an email. Y'all have a good rest of your week. Thanks.